Hi everyone, it's Toni back again with another video. So today I'm going to be talking about 5 of my favorite books of all time. Now these books span across different genres, so they're not all in the typical YA fantasy, science fiction, fantasy romance kind of vein that I normally have been talking about. So I hope to give you a bit of a broader flavor of the type of books that I like to read, not just the kind that I'm fixated on at the moment, because I tend to binge read certain genres and I go through phases. So in this video, I'm not going to be reading the synopsis of each book. I'm going to do each book justice and give them individual reviews at a later date, but I'm just going to let you know my top 5 books or series that I've read that are absolutely my favorite reads ever. So here we go. The first books I'm going to talk about is Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. So these are the entire 8 books in the series, ranging from The Philosopher's Stone to The Chamber of Secrets, The Prisoner of Azkaban, and so on and so forth. I absolutely loved Harry Potter because these books were basically the most imaginative I have ever been. They pushed my imagination to the 10th degree and I loved it. I absolutely loved each book. I've read each book at least 7 times. Prisoner of Azkaban is my absolute favorite of all of the Harry Potter books. That one, I've basically read it to the point that the books is in tatters. I have the physical copy and the Kindle copies of these books because I never ever want to be without them. You know, wherever I'm traveling, I want to have Harry Potter there. I'm never bored. I'm easily transported. The movies were absolutely brilliant, but didn't do the books any justice because there is just nothing as powerful as your own imagination. And there's certain things that your imagination can kind of picture that will just never translate in film, if that kind of makes any sense. So Harry Potter, I would give a 5 out of 5. If I could give it more, I possibly would. I recommend them to everybody. Absolutely loved it. J.K. Rowling is a genius, and do you know what? I just don't know anybody that wouldn't like Harry Potter. It's just so brilliant. The world is brilliant. Hogwarts is brilliant. Hermione is brilliant. If anybody knows what happened to Crookshanks, please let me know in the comment section, because this cat disappeared and you know, what happened to Crookshanks? I mean, where is Crookshanks? Why, of all the pets, was Crookshanks just the mysterious cat that was never seen again? Mystery, we will never know. I mean, I think that's the biggest mystery of the whole Harry Potter thing is, you know, what happened to Crookshanks? I mean, please let us know. I'm intrigued. Another book that I absolutely loved was recommended to me by a colleague of mine, and it's called The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Now, this is part of the Kingkiller trilogy. So there's The Name of the Name of the Wind and A Wise Man's Fear. And then there is like another little like novella in between that follows like one of the characters, one of the more obscure characters in the book, in the series. And I've not read that one, but I've read The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear, and they are both absolutely brilliant. The lead character, Ngozi, I think that's how you pronounce his name, is basically like this barkeep, but he's had such a colorful life, and he's moonlighting as a barkeep, but he's actually like this amazingly brilliant wizard. He's the best wizard that's ever been known in the kingdom, and he's basically living this life of hiding, and then there are these creatures that he has to destroy because they've come to destroy the world, basically, because they've been released. and he has to come out of hiding to kill them off. And basically he's like telling his story of his life, and it's told in his voice. It's absolutely brilliant. If you've never picked up anything in fantasy, and this sits squarely in fantasy, pick this up. I cannot rave about it enough. I would give this another 5 out of 5. I would give it more if I could. Absolutely loved it. It's quite a thick, chunky book, but it's a page turner. I couldn't put it down. But again, I didn't read it in a day because it's quite a lot to get through. But it's so brilliant, and it took Patrick Rothfuss years and years and years, to the point where his fans were getting sick of him, to release the sequel, A Wise Man's Fear. And I think it was just because The Name of the Wind was so good that he like almost kind of got like writer's fear. I wouldn't even say writer's block, but like writer's fear. He got scared because he didn't know if it could live up to the first book. And Wise Man's Fear absolutely lived up to the first book, but Name of the Wind, above and beyond, one of the most brilliant books I've ever read. Brilliantly written, had me looking in the dictionary for words that I just didn't know the meaning of constantly. And so it will kind of stretch your vocabulary a little bit if you're looking for that. And it just makes your imagination go wild. I love books that stretch my imagination, and The Name of the Wind is one of those books. So please pick it up and let me know what you think of it as well, if you've ever read it. Absolutely brilliant. So the third book that I would recommend is Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Adichie. Now, this book was set in the Biafran War in Nigeria, and this was like a civil war that took place in Nigeria in the 60s. And for me, as a Nigerian, it was an absolute education. I don't think I've ever like really studied the Biafran War, because even though I'm Nigerian, I grew up in the UK, so most of the history that I learned at school was you know, British and European history, and and I had to basically rely on my parents to educate me about Nigerian history, and they did a great job. But this book just tied everything together. It was emotive because it was told from the perspective of the Igbo tribe. I mean, not really. Well, that's not a fair thing to say, because it was told from the perspective of a group of friends from different tribes, and how this war changed the dynamic of their friendship. And not just the friends, but people that lived with them, like their servants and so on and so forth. And like the ending of the book absolutely threw me for a loop. The book did a brilliant job of kind of explaining the tribal conflict that is still present today amongst tribes of Nigeria, within Nigeria, and it was such a beautifully told story. It was so emotional. It had me in tears. I read this book in 24 hours. I just, my heart went out to everybody in the book, and Chimamanda did a brilliant job of, even though it was told from an Igbo perspective because it was set in Igbo land, she did a brilliant job of explaining how people of different tribes changed because the situation forced them to. And you know, the survival instinct basically kicked in, and it was just, oh God, it was amazing. That book was amazing. I mean, I was in tears. I laughed. I cried. I fell in love. I fell out of love. One of my favorite characters in the book was Kainene. Spoiler alert: Kainene goes missing in the book, and when she did, my heart broke, because she was the funniest, most amazing, most beautifully described. She was described as this most beautiful woman, very intelligent, quick-witted, you know, silver-tongued, and she was just, my heart broke. You know, I would recommend this book to everybody, because if you've never read it, I would absolutely recommend you pick it up. It was brilliant. The movie was good. And to be honest, this was one of the few movie adaptations that I've watched that was well done. But it can never compare to the book. I mean, nothing can ever compare to a good book. And there were certain things that, especially at the end, when you discover from whose perspective the book was being told all along, that she did really well, because you didn't realize until right at the end that the book was being told from a particular person's perspective, and it was the person you least expect's perspective that it was being told from. And when you find that out, you're just like, wow, so I think it was just an amazing book on social commentary, tribal conflict, the devastations of war, the effects that it has on family ties, relationships, friendships, tribal connections. It was fantastic. I loved it. So that's Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Adichie. So the fourth book I would recommend as a series, and that's the Hunger Games series by Suzanne Collins. Now it's the Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and The Mockingjay. Now these books I came across on Goodreads. So The Hunger Games is set in a dystopian universe, and it follows the life of a young lady called Katniss Everdeen. So basically there's like 13 districts in what I'm assuming is a futuristic America. And in the future of America, resources are slim, something has happened, the world almost destroyed itself, and the population has been shrunk down to these 13 districts, and they basically have to manage resources amongst each other. And everything is run through District 1, which is the capital. And then each district has something that they contribute. So one maybe contributes timber, and another district contributes, I don't know, fishing or something like that kind of thing. So in Katniss district, I think she lives in District 12. They're one of the poorer districts, and her father basically, I think they're miners in her district, and her father had died in a mine accident, spoiler alert, and basically Katniss ends up having to become the main provider for her family. So it's her sister Prue and her mother basically fell into a depression when her father died, and wasn't functional. So Katniss had to like take over the family and make sure that she provided food and shelter and sustenance for her family. And there is this lottery that each district has to all the adolescents in the district, each district have to submit themselves into this lottery. And in the lottery, two people are picked, a male and a female from each district, and they're entered into this competition called the Hunger Games, basically where they fight to the death for survival. And then the winner of the Hunger Games ends up basically having a life of luxury. They moved into a luxury part of the town. They have a nice house. They're basically given like the best food and everything that they would ever need and want for the rest of their lives. So basically Katniss ends up entering into this lottery and is picked to represent her district along with this young man called Peter. And it's basically a story of survival. That's what the Hunger Games is. It's a story of survival of the fittest, and questioning authority, questioning the powers that be, questioning why the 1% gets to enjoy the majority of the resources while the rest of the districts are left to fend for themselves. It's basically a very, very good examination on global society, capitalist society, and the way we live our lives, and the difference between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and it's an extreme look at adult and child dynamic, or adult and adolescent dynamic. It's an absolutely amazing read. I read each book in a day. So I basically got through the entire series in 3 days. And I was working a full-time job as well. So I basically wasn't sleeping. That book was that good. And everybody that I've recommended The Hunger Games to absolutely loved it. Now, and each book was as good, if not better than the predecessor, which you never really get from a series of books. I mean, usually like the first one is absolutely amazing, then the second one is kind of meh, and then the third one is like, wow, okay, that brings everything together. But The Hunger Games wasn't like that. Each book was really, really good, and each book was a page turner, and each book just absolutely blew my mind. The movies are good, but the first movie, the Hunger Games movie, was actually quite close to the book, but the other 2 movies or 3 movies did not do the books any justice whatsoever, especially like the last 2 movies, because there was so much going on in the Mockingjay, and the way that the kind of, I don't know what to call them, like the altered human beings, I suppose, and like the creatures that President Snow had made, the way they were described in the Mockingjay, I just don't think it's possible to translate that onto the screen, because it was done so well. They were so dark and so scary and so like beyond anything I've never seen. Like I just don't think that it's possible for that to be translated on the screen. I mean, there was like some kind of lizard people that was in the Mockingjay, and I didn't even see that in the movie, and I was just like, do you know what I mean? So I would recommend these books. They were absolutely brilliant. They were some of the best books I've ever read, and again, a 5 out of 5 would give it more if I could. So let me know what you guys think. Did you love it as much as I did, or am I exaggerating this to you guys? If you're going to pick up any YA fantasy book ever, the Hunger Games series is the book for you. I mean, I bow down. I bow down. It was that good. And then my 5th favorite book that I've ever read was The Novice by Trudi Canavan. I've done a review of the Black Magician trilogy, so please check out my reviews of the Black Magician trilogy. But of the trilogy, my favorite book was The Novice. I absolutely loved it. It really goes into the world of magic. Again, it looks at a dystopian society. It examines the world of the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. It has a very strong female protagonist. It examines social commentary in a world where things like homosexuality is frowned upon. Independent women are frowned upon. Somebody wanting to rise above their station is frowned upon. Someone seeking knowledge is frowned upon. The education of women, which still goes on in certain parts of our world, is frowned upon. Everything that is a problem within our global society is kind of infused into this book, but in an alternate universe, so to speak. I absolutely love this book. I've read this book. I've lost count the number of times that I've read this book. I just think that Trudi Canavan is a brilliant author. She is able to translate the desires of somebody who just wants more and doesn't understand why they cannot have more, or kind of rages against the machine and seeks for a better future for herself and the world that she lives in. She really, really describes that very well, and it translates so well on the page. I think that this is one of the most underrated books of all time. I would love for this book to get notoriety and be made into a series, like maybe a Netflix original series or something like that. I would totally be here for it. But I just loved it. I cannot sing its praises enough. as you well know. So again, please let me know what your thoughts are. Did you love this book as much as I did? Have you ever read it? Have you been inspired to pick it up? Let me know your thoughts. Did you read it because I recommended it and think it was a dud? I would love to know why. Please leave your comments down below. There are a couple of other books that didn't quite make it into my top 5, but I still really enjoyed, such as the Twilight Saga by Stephanie Meyer. I thought that was a beautifully well-written book. I liked the Anita Blake series by Laura K. Hamilton. I liked the first 3 books of the series. The rest kind of became a bit monotonous and samey, but I really enjoyed her books. I absolutely love Sula by Toni Morrison, but again, it wasn't something that I could say was my favorite of all time, but highly recommend it. I will actually do a separate review of all the Toni Morrison books that I've ever read and enjoyed, and let you know my thoughts on them, because I think Toni Morrison is an absolutely brilliant author, and at one point I was absolutely convinced that I was going to have to go and do another master's at Columbia University, where she's a lecturer at Columbia University, and I was going to stalk her all the way to Columbia University because I wanted to learn and be in her environment, because I love Toni Morrison so much. So check out Toni Morrison. She writes fiction set from an African American perspective, but it's like either post-slavery or kind of around the civil rights movement or just before the civil rights movement. And it really gives you an in-depth insight into the struggles of African Americans and the way they lived. So she's brilliant. She's a brilliant storyteller, Toni Morrison. And another book that I would recommend, but wasn't on my top list, was probably like it's like the one of the 2 biographies I've ever read in my life, which was Dreams of My Father by Barack Obama. Now, this is his second biography, and it was released shortly before he became the President of the United States of America. And this book was inspirational. It makes you look at the world that you're in and think about what you as an individual can do to make your world better. What you as an individual can do to make your society, your community, your environment a better place to live in. It makes you aspire for change. It makes you want to live in a better world. It is just a very inspirational book. And it's the kind of book that I wish every world leader would write. Because if everybody had the vision and the desire to make the world a better place the way Barack Obama does, we would live in a far more egalitarian society, global society. We would live in a far more tolerant world. We would live in a far more appreciative world, understanding world, kinder world. If you're a biography lover, I would encourage you to read it. If you're not a biography lover like me, if you tend to stay away from them, I would encourage you to read this one, because this one was easy to digest. And it was easy, and I don't think it was just because I like the man and I'm inspired by the man and I admire Barack Obama and feel like he's a fantastic role model. That's not the only reason. Because to be honest, I didn't really know much about him when I read the book, and I read the book to learn more about him, because at that time he was just like this whirlwind senator guy that was going to become, but everybody hoped would become the President of the United States. And then he did. So I would highly recommend that book. It will give you hope. That book gave me hope. And considering who they have leading the United States at the moment, I would encourage everybody to read that book, Dreams of My Father by Barack Obama, because it will give you hope that change can happen and things can get better, and this time too shall pass. So yeah, that's it. Those are my favorite books. So please comment down below. Let me know what your favorite books are. I really want to hear from you guys. I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know if my suggestions inspired you to pick any of these books up. So as per usual, please like, share and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that you know when I'm putting up new videos. And yeah, until next time, bye.